So it's right around 3:30 p.m. on Wednesday, November 15th. I'm actually taking today as a day off because I've literally spent the last 7 days running around every single day, sometimes starting really early at like 7 a.m., trying to get stuff done. Exactly a week ago today, I was supposed to have a use and occupancy hearing in court against the landlord on that day and got up at like 4 a.m. to get everything ready, got up at 4 a.m. the day before to get everything ready, had a extermination on Monday, November 7th, where I was up at 4 a.m. So today's like really the very first day I've had off in over 8 days. And I'm watching a movie, just one of those fun Lifetime holiday movies. And the boss is this strong Black woman. I have absolutely no problem with skin color. I grew up in Chicago in the 70s and early 80s, and already there was a lot of Black leadership going on in the 70s and 80s throughout not just Chicago, but the entire country. Some of my very closest friends throughout my entire life were Black females. And already when I was a kid, Oprah Winfrey was huge. Janet Jackson was big. The Cosby Show was huge. Other African-American leaders such as Jesse Jackson and Michael Jackson. And it was basically like, Eddie Murphy, the decade of Eddie Murphy, and of up-and-coming Black actresses like Janet Jackson, like LaToya Jackson. She was actually pretty popular in the 80s. So I've never had a problem with skin color. It's behavior that is the problem. And I live in a building full of people who are behaviorally disturbed, who are career criminal sex offenders, just very violent, aggressive people who all happen to be minorities for some strange reason. There's a few that aren't. And they think that because I have a problem with their behavior, I have a problem with their skin color. And that is the stupidest conclusion on the planet. It's actually a lack of deductive reasoning, right? So you chalk everything up to like the most obvious potential cause when it has nothing to do with that. Most things are actually not about skin color. They're about economics, control, and power. So when the landlord chooses to fill this entire building complex with minority criminal sex offenders, that's not my problem. That's them trying to make a political statement. And they're forcing me to react to it as if it has something to do with skin color, and it doesn't. So again, I grew up in the 80s where there were already a tremendous amount of Black superstars across the board, not just in music, but in sports and in television. Like, look at Oprah. Oprah was a superstar starting in the early 80s. Eddie Murphy was a superstar starting in the early 80s. Janet Jackson was huge when I was in high school. And so was LaToya Jackson. And there were a number of like family shows like The Cosby Show and Different Strokes that were all about Black families. And I had no problem with that. I was watching those just like everybody else. I loved Prince. Prince and Michael Jackson were some of my favorite musicians of the entire 80s. I loved In Living Color, which was a hard rock band of all African-American musicians. Loved them. They were huge when I was in college. En Vogue was huge when I was in high school and college. They were an all Black female a cappella group. They were a little bit like Boyz II Men. I grew up with Boyz II Men. I grew up with En Vogue. Janet Jackson was probably the biggest female superstar of the 80s and 90s. I'm not sure what happened to her lately, but she was huge. And everybody who was my age loved her. Nobody cared about her skin color because skin color has nothing to do with talent. It has nothing to do with anything. There were a ton of sports stars, Michael Jordan, Walter Payton, Deion Sanders. I mean, I could just go on and on. Magic Johnson of the 80s. That were super talented athletes that were Black. Nobody cared. I mean, they were superstars because they were Black. O.J. Simpson was huge in the 70s before he started murdering people. Nobody cared about his skin color. So, I'm just going to say I couldn't care less about people's skin color. It is completely irrelevant to anything. But if people want to make everything about skin color, then they're letting their stupid show. And I certainly have no problem with strong Black women. I grew up in the 80s that was full of strong Black women and strong Black men. But really, it was all about the strong Black women in the 80s and certainly the 90s as well. Oprah Winfrey is probably one of the most iconic strong Black women to have been super successful early in the 80s. And so were a whole lot of other superstars. So I'm just going to keep enjoying my holiday movie where the boss is a strong Black woman who definitely knows her stuff. And I couldn't care less. Like, the more strong Black women there are out there that are successful, that are running businesses, that are in charge, the better off everybody else is, of course. But when I live in a building full of sex offenders and violent criminal thugs that the landlord chooses to place in this building, and they all happen to be minorities, that's not my problem. That has nothing to do with me and everything to do with the landlord's political beliefs and business practices. And I'm just trying to deal with it as best I can. But me having an issue with criminal behavior has nothing to do with skin color. It's with behavior. So get that straight and stop letting your stupid show. And I'm just going to keep enjoying my holiday movie with strong Black women in it, because there should be lots of strong Black women everywhere in charge of things. I think they do a very great job of being in charge. And I enjoy watching movies where they're in charge, and I enjoy living in a world where they're in charge. And it has nothing to do with skin color once again. So I'm just going to put that out there and enjoy the rest of my afternoon and my one day off that I've had in the last 8 days.